Hello everyone, and welcome back to my inner anchor. Today I'm going to slow everything right down a bit. I'm going to return to something simple, something steady, something that's always with us, even when life feels loud and gets too consuming. Today we're returning to breathwork. This is why it's called the Anchor Breathwork episode. The reason for that, I wanted to introduce you guys to what I'm sort of terming as anchor breath, the grounding practice sort of at the heart of the inner anchor. It's sort of 3 exercises. We kind of touched upon them before, but I wanted to go into them a bit more. Bit of breath work to return to your still point when everything gets busy, and you get uptight, or you're carrying more than you really wanted to. And I'll be honest, the reason I've brought this one a bit forward compared to where I had planned is because I really needed it this last week or so. I've had a lot going on, as you know, I've mentioned on the podcast before. I've had a lot go on with my family and their health, and then I was in a car accident, and then this week my wife's car broke down, and it's just a relentless thing, and I've had to rely on breath work and on grounding practices in general a bit more than I have in more recent weeks. So I wanted to bring this forward because I'm aware of what I am having to use, and I know I'm not the only one out there who's feeling a little overwhelmed and a little unsteady. So I wanted to bring out a series of grounding practices with the breath work. And so before we go anywhere, I think we should arrive together. So whether you are with your walking, sitting, driving, listening with headphones on, chilling out in your living room, let this be a moment to come back to your body. So take a moment, notice your posture, notice your shoulders, notice the pace of your breath, and bring it slow. Remember, at the inner anchor, there's no judgment. There's no pressure, it's just awareness, and this is where we begin. Because most of us, in fact, I would say pretty much all of us, especially us guys, we live in our heads. We live in the noise, in the pressure, we live in the I'll deal with that later, and the breath becomes something we forget about until we need it. So today, we're going to come back to it. Come back to it slowly, steadily, and honestly. And in conjunction with this episode, we will have 3 bonus episodes which will go through breathwork practices of the various techniques I'm about to talk to you about. Because, being honest, I've needed all of them this week or so, and I hope wherever you are, you're landing. And breathwork isn't for everyone, but I wanted to put it out there for those who it is there for. And with that in mind, wanted to be honest. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. Why I think the breath matters. For me, it was something I never really gained. I never really believed in. It was something that came along with finding meditation again through my CBT and counselling. And sometimes it is just a little reset. It's a little quick way to bring yourself back to centre again. And I always thought it was kind of a bit too hippie for me personally. But it's not. It works. And there's a lot of stuff that I kind of rubbished until I needed it. And like I say, this won't be for everyone, nothing's for everyone, but it is for some. But there is science behind it. There really is. There's actual, fact about it. Your breath is literally the only part of your nervous system that you can control on purpose. When your mind speeds up, your breath tends to get the same way. When you're stressed, it becomes shallow. And when you're overwhelmed, it kind of disappears into your chest almost. When you're carrying a lot, when you're stretched thin, when you're trying to hold everything together, your breath becomes the very first thing to tighten and the last thing you notice. But when you slow your breath down, your body follows, your mind follows, your emotions follow. Breathwork isn't about being calm. It's about giving yourself a way back. It was a way for me personally, to recenter and realign, to find that inner anchor. When you almost get that adrenaline rush, that fight or flight mode when something's triggered you, or something's happened that's caused an emotional response of overwhelm. It's my route and my way of realigning a bit and getting out of that mindset. And I can do it wherever. I can do it sitting at a desk. I can do it finding a quiet spot in a workplace if I need to. I can do it in traffic while driving. I can do it sitting at home. I can do it on a walk out somewhere. I can do it anywhere. It's a very easily accessible thing to be able to do. And it doesn't have to be a long 40-minute meditate. It can be a quick 60 seconds realign. And we'll go through some of those things just a bit later on. But let's talk about what actually happens in your body. So when you inhale, your heart rate naturally rises. And when you exhale, it naturally falls. So every long, slow exhale is telling your nervous system something. It's telling your nervous system that you're safe. You can soften. And this is why breathwork works. Not because it's spiritual, of course it can be, and not because it's trendy, although it's everywhere at the moment, I know, but because it's actually science, it's actually biology. And when life gets loud, returning to honesty into your biological sound is your inner anchor. We often override our bodies, push through, hold our breath, tighten our chests, clench our jaw, we disconnect. I was a prime example of it. I've done it a lot this week because of everything I've got going on, and it's being conscious of bringing it back to self. It's not always easy, but you do get there in the end. We don't notice when we're overwhelmed until we're already miles past the limit. We've all done it. I've said on this podcast before, I thought I was doing okay with things until I properly checked in with myself and realised I've been running for 15 years. And that's a long time to be running before you realise you passed the limit. And there was a number of practices, some of which I've spoken about before on here with breathwork and meditation. Obviously last week we spoke about journaling, and then we've also got things like going to the gym and eating healthily and all those kind of bits that keep me on track. But your breath is the first thing to go, and it's also the first thing that can at least bring you back to self for a moment. So before we go any further, notice where your breath is. Notice where it sits. Notice the depth and the pace. You don't need to change anything. You could be in a good place, but just notice it. It's a real centering and grounding experience. The awareness alone is grounding in itself. And I wanted to share, my personal story. There have been seasons in life where my mind felt like it was running ahead of me, fast, loud, relentless. Times where I felt stretched so thin, trying to hold everything together. And like I said a minute ago, times I didn't even realise how disconnected I become from my own body. That moment where you kind of look around and you think, am I definitely here? Is this really happening? And I lived like that for quite a long time. I was functioning, I was going to work, I was showing up, doing the things I needed to, paying bills, paying mortgage, all those kind of things. But kind of emotionally, spiritually, internally, however you want to call it, I was miles away from myself. And that's for a number of reasons with me personally. As I record this, it's Father's Day, which is always an emotionally tough day for me. I haven't lost my dad. You know, it can be a heightened day for emotions. Anyone who's lost anyone, I'm sure, will feel similar. But with that, you know, it brings up feelings, and I've become aware in my own internal work over the last couple of years of when I kind of left myself. It's hard to say, and it's hard to explain, so I hope this comes across the right way. When my dad died, I didn't just lose him, I lost who I was. Because I told myself I would never be that boy again. I'd never be that guy again. And too much happened for that guy to ignore. My dad was too integral to my life for me to move on that path, as I thought, to carry on that path and that trajectory without him. I didn't see how I was going to do it, so I invented a new way. I tried to build another path, and some things, parts of it, have been really beautiful and positive and fantastic, but other aspect of that is that I wasn't living how I should have been, and that I left my 22-year-old self where it was. So there's a part of me, because I am him, and you know, I am that furious, heartbroken kid, to quote a line in the poem I wrote. There is a part of me that never grew beyond that, because I thought if I moved forward, then I was leaving behind everything that I had previously with my dad. And that went on for a long time, longer than I actually ever cared to acknowledge and to admit. It's difficult to comprehend that I could try and live outside of myself for so long. Maybe that's why I went from thing to thing, trying to find something to hold on to. You know, from my own festival to working to other festivals, I was constantly keeping myself busy between my own festival, just which play at other festivals I was working at, volunteering at gigs, martial arts radio shows, personal challenges, anything that would fill my time, because I didn't know who I was when I just sat with myself. And I think I've said before, in fact I know I have, that, you know, I just remember sitting on that beach with Joe. Well, it was on the coastal path actually, and we sat on this bench and just started talking, and it was just us, and there was no one else around, and there was no pressure, and Joe has always been absolutely amazing with listening. She's one of the most kind, genuine people you'll ever meet on this planet. And I remember just sitting there and talking, and I just got completely overwhelmed, and the tears were flooding out, and my chest was tight, my mind was racing, my body got tense, and I didn't realise just how far away I'd gone and just how much time I had allowed to pass until I stopped for that moment long enough to notice. See, that's the thing about busy minds. They don't announce themselves. They creep in slowly. They build up, and before you know it, you're living in a head and living in your head instead of being in yourself. And breathwork was one of the first things I tried to help slow me down, enough to actually feel what was going on inside of me. And It's not for everyone. I wasn't trying to fix it with breath work. I wasn't trying to analyse anything necessarily. I was just trying to sit with it, to meet it, to be with it. You know, I physically felt a difference. I felt a relaxation with my shoulders dropping in a way that I didn't even know I used to. I wasn't holding myself up. I wasn't pent up. My chest wasn't stuck out. You know, that softened. My mind wasn't going at 100 miles an hour, going, right, you haven't done this, you need to do that, this has been thinking, what if you did this? And just constantly I felt, and over time with breath work, you know, I kind of felt myself return a bit. And that's why the inner anchor has a breathwork side of it. You know, it sits at the very, very core of the inner anchor and why everything came to be, and how I found the inner anchor. I found it through breathwork. I found it through a combination of breathwork, meditation, grounding, journaling, going to the gym, blasting out music that I hadn't blasted out for years because I was scared of the memories that would pop up within it. Watching old films, watching old comedies that I used to enjoy, reading, allowing myself that time to just be, getting amongst nature, getting amongst trees and woods and sea and everything that kind of, you know, realigned. And I've always found trees and sea and running water, you know, waterfalls, that kind of thing, rivers and streams, very, very grounding. And there's a place in Cornwall that I absolutely love, called St Nectans, and it's a waterfall trail, and you walk from the road for about, don't know, it's a good sort of 45-minute walk to get to the top of it, I think. And then you can go down into where the waterfall itself is, and it's beautiful. And you have people tying ribbons to trees for loved ones, and I've always found it so precious. And every time I go there, I buy a ribbon for my dad and I tie it to the same branch. And you know, it's just something I like to do. And I was showing some photos of this to my friend Neil, who's been an amazing friend throughout this journey, as many others have as well. But I was having this particular conversation with my friend Neil, and Neil mentioned, he said, "Oh, it sounds great, man." And I was showing him some photos, and he said, "Oh, I bet you put your feet in that." And I said, "I never have." And he went, "Why?" And I went, "I don't know." He said, "Next time you go in there, mate, you know, get your shoes and socks off, get your feet in there. That's beautiful." And I did. And this is going to sound really hippie-ish and really whatever, but something changed. Something changed in me. Something really brought me back to self. Really did. You know, I just stood in the waterfall stream with my feet in it. I could feel, you know, the water it's sort of October time, so it was a bit chilly, and for the first time I felt present in a long time. In a long time. And because it was cold, I'd kind of naturally started slowing down my breath as you do, because I didn't want to step out of it. And it was, I said to Jo on the way, "I feel different after that." And she went, "Good different?" I was like, "Yeah." It was like an awakening. It was like a part of my soul opened up again. So breathwork is really important to me. And that's why it has to exist as a part of my inner anchor podcast, as well. I'm going to use to tell you guys the inner anchor kind of philosophy and way of thinking, for want of a better term, in general. And I hope this helps you guys. You know, it's simple, it's steady, you can do it anywhere, it's free, and it works. You know, in a day and age where certain big gyms charge 100 plus quid a month and everyone else is going through the roof in terms of, you know, cost of living crises and rents and mortgages and outlays, anything, no one's got that. Breathwork is free. You can do it anywhere. You don't need any specialist equipment. You don't even need me. there are plenty of breathwork exercises available elsewhere. I just wanted to do my take on it because I really believe in it, and I feel that it's a good thing, positive thing, something that really helps me. And the whole philosophy of the inner anchor has never been about being perfect, being zen, no namaste and here's 50 quid, none of that. What it has been about is being honest, being true, being authentic, and sharing my story. It isn't a pity party. It's a, this is what's happened and this is how I've come to be. This is how life has shaped me, changed me. This is how I am now. This is where I've been and this is where I want to go. And hopefully some of these tools can help you as well. So, we are going to talk about what I'm calling the anchor breath. I've been talking about it as breathwork, but really it's kind of the core grounding for me, and the practice of the inner anchor, our way return till your still point when life gets crazy. And before we go into any sort of techniques and the various sort of 3 main breaths that I will talk upon, which I'll be going through, each breath, by the way, will have its separate guide, so if you look below this then you will have a guide for each one. I kind of wanted to talk about why each one has a kind of a little philosophy, I guess, for one of too grand a term. And it's built on 3 sort of main principles, I guess. First one being simplicity. Grounding isn't complicated, and it doesn't need to be. You don't need specific equipment, or you don't have to pay someone. You don't have to go to a particular class. You don't have to go, we all have spaces where we like to do it and where you like to be, and you need to feel comfortable and relaxed and all of those things. But what you really need is presence. For me, I do have my favourite places to do breath work. There's places here locally I like to go. There are places within my home I like to sit. There's that beach in Cornwall that I love to be upon. There's St. Nectans I've just told you about. It's being generally amongst nature and the trees, which I find really helpful. But you'll always find what works for you and where you're most comfortable, where you feel most grounded, and those places are very special. But normally they're not expensive to go to. I mean, Cornwall's quite a bit in petrol, I guess, but in terms of a place to be present, all you really need is presence and being in that moment. So there's a simplicity to them. There's a steadiness. It's slow, it's intentional, it's strong. And breath work really helps me personally feel like I'm standing on solid ground again. I can get that sense from feeling underneath, right? I can stand tall again with breathness. And it's about returning. It's not about escape. I'm not trying to tell you a way to get away from yourself. You're coming back to yourself. As I said before, it's not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about finding your footing and softening that outer armor, shell, whatever you want to call it, and settling back into yourself again. And that's why there's 3 of them, because each one of them sort of meets in a slightly different way. So the first one I'm just going to talk about is the first one that came to me anyway. But it's a really good way for me to fully reassign, and they're all relatively quick, none of them are particularly long in term, but The first one I'm just calling the anchor breath, and it's a breath to kind of rebalance yourself. It literally takes 5 minutes. It's for when you need to balance, you need that structure, you need to realign. When your mind's a bit scattered, when you're poured in all over the shop, and when you need to come back to yourself. There's the still point release, for when you need to kind of maybe soften yourself a bit, and for when you feel tight and your chest feels heavy, again 5 to 6 minutes, or something you're carrying you haven't spoken about loud and it's supposed to ease with tension. And then we've got the grounding exhale, and this is probably the most simple one out of all of them, the shortest one, literally a couple of minutes you can do of it to just realign with yourself. And it's for when you're overstimulated, when you're overwhelmed, when you need to settle quickly. And these breaths don't take you away from yourself, they bring you back. They return you to your still point, back to your anchor, the place that you need to be, and what you need to be and how you want to be. And that's why they're at the very heart of the inner anchor way of thinking. Now each single one of those is going to have a separate depth run through practice, so make sure that you go check out the tapes, go check out sound bites on Spotify and YouTube for each one of those, and hopefully that will help you guys out, because it's important, it really is, to just take that time. And you can use the anchor breath wherever, you can use it. I would say you'll notice the most difference, when your mind feels full, your chest feels tight, you're overwhelmed, you carry more than you think, you carry more than you're letting on and telling people, you feel disconnected, or you're just trying to hold on to everything, keep everything together. And these are the moments where grounding matters most. It's not the calm days, it's the loud ones. Think about your own life. When did this show up? I mean, is it sitting in the car anxiously before work? Is it lying awake at night? Is it being wound up after an argument? Do you get tense before difficult conversations? When your mind spirals, when your chest tightens, when you feel so far from yourself. I mean, for me, the last couple of weeks, it's been, being hit by another car, starting stationary traffic, and the guy not wanting to give you insurance details, trying to get you to just drive on, and then dealing with all the aftermath after that, even all the stuff you don't want to have to deal with, calling insurance and calling the police, going to A&E, going to GP appointments, picking up painkillers. Then I'm still without my car because mine's getting inspected at the moment. Joe's car, she was kind enough to lend me her car so I could get to and from work. Then her car breaks down, and it's just all these kind of moments. There's been a lot, and all these things, and you'll all have those moments where everything gets triggered a little bit. And that's where the breathwork becomes a lifeline. And that's where anchor breath, I hope, will help you. It's not to fix everything, just to try and give you a steadier place to stand while you move through it. And sometimes that's all you need. And yeah, I'm sure you've had plenty of times of your own over the last couple of weeks where you've been overwhelmed, stressed out, wound up. But I thank you for being here today. If your mind's been busy, you've been stretched thin, you've been trying to keep up with everything around you, I hope this has been a bit of a reminder to you that you can always come back to your still point. You can always come back to your breath. You can always come home to yourself. So I hope this helps. Please check out the other links, for which will be below, for the sound bites for each of the breath work. I'm going to talk about those a little more in those specific posts, but that's what I wanted to do. You probably see me launching a few more things. I've been teasing something else coming, but this is the first thing I wanted to launch separate to the podcast, although it's going to run alongside it, being an audio file, but more of a series for that, for people who just wanted some breathwork tapes. I've been asked to do this, so I hope anyone who has asked is going to find this really helpful. Next week we're going a bit deeper, and we're going to be talking about what it's like when you feel lost and how grounding helps you find your way back. Until then, breathe, slow down, return to your inner anchor, and I'll see you next week, guys. Take care.